Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another biblical prescription for life. Isn't it a great day to be alive? I'm just so glad to be talking to each one of you. So thankful for what God is doing in each one of your life and for drawing you here to listen today and for giving us the opportunity to get the message out that Christ is the key to health. Well, today we're going to continue answering a question regarding inflammation. But before we do that, I'm going to go to our biblical prescription, and that's from Genesis during creation week. Genesis 1 verse 29. And God said, "See, I have given you every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed. To you it shall be for food." So that gives us a little bit of an inclination of what God's plan for our nutrition might look like. So hold that with you. But today we're going to answer a question regarding inflammation. And remember, inflammation can come from many different sources. Any foreign body that gets in our body, depending on our individual genetics, can elicit an immune reaction. We call that inflammation, and antigens can cause that. We've talked a lot the last few weeks about this foreign invader called spike protein and how it causes inflammation. But today we have a question from someone that has inflammation, maybe from another source, and we have an expert guest who's joining us today who knows a lot about inflammation, knows a lot about nutrition. In fact, this expert is probably the leading nutrition expert that I know in the entire world. So let's get on with that question.
This person writes in, Dr. Grieger, my arthritis, inflammation in the joints, is causing me problems. And I assume that's pain problems, walking problems. Any insights into food and nutrition which might help inflammation and foods that might hurt in this inflammatory process? So lots of people have arthritis.
Right. You look, and it's not just arthritis. Many common chronic diseases have an inflammatory component, not just kind of autoimmune diseases, something like rheumatoid arthritis or ulcerative colitis, or something like, MS. But, diabetes has an inflammatory component.
Yes.
Heart disease has an inflammatory component. Cancer can sometimes have an inflammatory component. And so there are many unhealthy aspects of our lives that contribute to inflammation in the broad environment, such as traffic pollution, toxic chemicals, cigarettes, chronic stress, too little physical activity, and sleep. We can all get these increases in these systemic markers of inflammation, like something like C-reactive protein. But, the main driver of this of inflammatory chronic disease are the portions of the outside world that we introduce into our bodies 3 times a day, and that is what we eat. And look, it's easy to tell if a food is pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory. You feed it to people, and you just see what happens to these markers in their blood. And when you do that, you can do that with whole meals, you can do that with whole diets, you can do that with individual foods, individual components of foods. And when researchers have done that, they develop what's called a dietary inflammatory index, by scouring thousands of such experiments and coming up with kind of a scoring system. And to no surprise, given our epidemics of chronic disease in this country, the average person is eating a pro-inflammatory diet, but it's just a matter of decreasing the amount of pro-inflammatory foods, increasing the amount of anti-inflammatory foods, and you can flip your diet into an overall anti-inflammatory diet on a day-to-day basis. And so broadly speaking, the components of processed foods and animal products, such as saturated fat, trans fat, and cholesterol, were found to be pro-inflammatory, while the constituents of whole plant foods, such as fiber, phytonutrients, strongly anti-inflammatory. And so if you look at, and so once you have this dietary inflammatory index, these scores are linked to higher risk of cardiovascular disease, lower kidney, lung, and liver function. Those eating more pro-inflammatory diets age faster, have higher risk of premature death, and even worse mental health, higher rates of depression, anxiety, impaired well-being, and sleep quality. Now, it's not necessarily the anti-inflammatory components, because look, an anti-inflammatory diet is kind of synonymous with a healthy plant-based diet. And so, there's lots of reasons healthy plant-based diets could be improving your mental health and reducing pain in your joints, etc. But but the role of inflammation would help explain why a plant-based diet can affect so many different organ systems simultaneously. The fact that a heart-healthy diet, is also a brain-healthy diet and a liver-healthy diet and a kidney-healthy diet. How could one diet do all that? Well, one is the inflammation, and another is the improvement of blood flow.
Yeah.
Right? All organs need nutrients and oxygen, get rid of waste. And so it's not just improving, blood flow to the heart muscle, but to the brain, to the discs in our back to keep them pliable, and so we don't get, low back pain, etc. So all of our body tissues need blood flow. So a heart healthy diet is a body healthy diet, and that's a diet centered around fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, which are beans, split peas, chickpeas, and lentils, nuts and seeds, mushrooms, herbs, and spices, basically real food that grows out of the ground. These are our healthiest choices.
So it wouldn't be necessarily a donut in the morning and a burger at lunch and things of that nature,
Right. So you can imagine. So the top sources of saturated fat in the American diet, number 1 is cheese. Number 2 are desserts like cake and ice cream. Number 3 is chicken. 4 is pork, and 5 is beef, particularly burgers. So what you just described was like the most pro-inflammatory diet you could possibly imagine. And so no wonder we are dropping dead at rates higher than some of the worst chronic disease rates in the world, although the rest of the world is catching up as they westernize their diet. As we export our, KFC to their country, all of a sudden they start living and dying like Americans. And so we need to role model a better diet for the world.
I recently did some studies and got some information about how messaging and how these external inputs that we get from the media affects what we think is truth. And if you hear something twice, you think it's a truth. And if you say chicken's a vegetable more than 3 times, a lot of people believe that, and it's internalized. And when your brain starts thinking about, your behavior follows. So we have to get this message out on all these media platforms we have.
And we are absolutely bombarded every day by messages from the junk food industry, from the snack food industry, from the soda industry, from the meat and dairy board, on and on all the billboards and all the advertisements. They have these tremendously profitable industries. They have the money, right? They sell brown sugar water for a few bucks a bottle. It's all profit. They have the money to do the Super Bowl ads and right. You're never going to see an ad on the Super Bowl for sweet potatoes or something. Like, it's just, the system is set up to make us sick, not because someone is, it's just the way the system is. It's not like people, the CEO of Coca-Cola is rubbing their sticky hands together thinking, how do we contribute to the childhood obesity epidemic? They're just like, how do I satisfy the next quarter earnings for my shareholders? And if they started caring about children's health, they'd get booted out and they'd bring another CEO. It's just the system is set up to make money. What makes money? These terrible foods. And the reason we get dollar menu burgers is because taxpayer subsidies to the sugar industry, to the feed crops, to make artificially cheap meat. When, if we're going to subsidize any foods, why not subsidize fruits and vegetables? Why not make the healthiest foods the most affordable? Because then we can actually support the health of our nation instead of contributing to its decline.
I've noticed that over the last decade, especially since you and others have been talking about this. At least we're talking about it now. And I know you've been lobbying for a long time, and it takes time. But, I've been on my soapbox, inflammation, heart disease, we have to get the word out. And this social media, I'm surprised when a YouTube goes up and lots of people watch these, people just, we do television, radio, not too many people watch those, but these YouTube, everyone likes it, but you got to keep it to like 10 minutes or so. One other thing I wanted to touch on, in this pandemic, we've had lots of inflammation. Okay. We talk about a lot of things, a lot of funding, and I just read where the government is now spending a lot of money funding their messaging. I wish they'd spend some money funding how plant-based nutrition would help the inflammation from all these pandemic-related issues.
Look, right, and that's not even addressing the comorbidities. What increases the risk of a severe case of COVID? Obesity, heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure. Any of that sound familiar? All of which can be prevented, arrested, reversed with a healthy enough plant-based diet. And then, indeed, now we have data. Harvard did the largest study looking at 600,000 people, found that those who eat more plant-based, more whole, healthy plant food, significantly less likely not only to get COVID in the first place, but then if they do get COVID, significantly less likely to suffer a severe course. And it just makes sense that eating healthier would better support your immune system.
Unfortunately, we're slowly moving that direction. But Dr. Grieger, thank you for what your team is doing. We have a lot of activists that are watching this today. And if you want to be active in this, support Nutrition Facts. You can get their site, .org. They send stuff out on a regular basis. They're easy to deal with. And what I like is you guys you're not beholden. And I applaud that. And I hope that always continues, because I'm sure people approach you all the time. They approach us all the time, but we've tried. We're not going to take anything on these YouTube videos. We're not going to take any money from that. We're not going to do any ads.
Right.
We're not going to do that. And I hope you guys stay the same. So thank you for taking your time to share with our listeners and viewers today.
Thank you so much. In fact, even all the proceeds from my book sales are all donated to charity. It really is just about getting out, the message to help you and your family eat healthier and live healthier.
Next time you're down in Tennessee, come visit us at Heartwise. We're in Chattanooga, and we just help you have a great day.
I'd love to do that.
Well, I want to thank Dr. Grieger for answering that question. Please share this with your friends and neighbors. Give it a thumbs up. Give your comments about inflammation, and we'll be back very, very soon with yet another biblical prescription for life.